All right, let's continue on. So at this point, we've got the view model done. Let's jump over to this. So looking at this crazy sketch, we've got the PM done, the presenter model is done, and the view model is done, and that's all being set up as we expect. Subscribed, all that stuff. So now it's time to build our view. This is the actual Babylon.js stuff that we need to build. The thing you'll note that's pretty important to note is that now that we're jumping out into we're out into this framework sphere of our sim. This is a Babylon specific piece of script. It's going to have a bunch of Babylon imports in it, and it's not going to be very testable. It's an unfortunate thing. I don't know how to write tests for Babylon. Probably a way to do it, but it seems difficult. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take a position and orientation, position, rotation, and length, and we're going to render an object into the scene. And I don't really know how you would write a unit test for that. Perhaps you can. Maybe one of these days I'll get smart enough. But for now, we're just going to write a view component. So let's get back into some code here. So let's close a bunch of stuff. Close all. And we're going to jump into my folders and get up here into Babylon. Views. So the first thing I'm going to add is we're going to add we're just going to create a view called a tape measure TS. Could call it a tape measure view. Let's call it a tape measure view just so we can see it. Okay. Now let's go ahead and write this class. We're going to export class tape measure view. Now, what do we know about this tape measure? We know we're going to get handed a tape to follow. So we're going to get this constructor, and we're going to get a tape, which is a tape measure. And from this tape measure, we're going to create a tape measure PM. We're going to pass in the tape. And so we're going to get this constant PM is equal to that. We actually need to hang on to this PM because we need to dispose of it if we're disposed of. So we're going to do a private PM is going to be tape measure PM. And then we're going to do this dot. All right, tape measure PM. Oh, we got to do a new. Create a new tape measure PM. Why don't you? Oh, we have to have a view. So then we're going to do this. Remember, our tape measure, our PM needs a callback. So we're going to do a update view, and that is going to get a VM, which is a tape measure VM. We're going to apply that, and so this is this dot update view. All right. So now we've wired up, we've set it up so our view gets created. What it does is it creates a presenter model, and then that presenter model will update this anytime the entity changes, our entity changes, this tape measure changes, and it'll pass it a VM. And we already know what that VM is, so let's go ahead and let's make our stuff. So this is kind of the drudgery part of writing in Babylon. We're going to make transform. So we're going to have a private root. I like to call it a root node. I like to make a transform at the very bottom of everything, and that's going to be a transform node. FORM transform node. There it is. We need that. So let's come down here. We need to create that. So this dot root node is going to equal what do we call this? Oh, a new transform node. Going to give it, what do we need for this guy? We need a name, so we're going to call this tape measure, and we're going to add in the tape.id so we can see that in there. We need a scene. We have to be given the scene. We also need the scene has a root object that everything gets attached to, and this is what scales. We haven't really talked a ton about it, but Babylon at its base root is all in meters. But because we're doing this stuff for construction, I have a node in there at 0, 0, 0 that converts everything to inches, and it just makes it hard or easier for us to think about it. So we want to add our tape measure to this root node. So we're going to call it the world root, and that's a transform node. Okay, and so back to this though, we got a scene. Don't know if we need anything else. Let's go ahead and do this dot root node dot set parents, and that's going to be this world root. That puts us at the parent, and then we also need to make sure our scale gets reset. That's something that Babylon doesn't really do. This dot root node dot scaling needs to be equal to vector 3.1. That gets us down to every movement on this root node will now be in inches, and it'll be applied appropriately. All right, so we got our root node. Now, we already know that with our root node, we can go ahead and position it now. When our update happens, our view is going to be updated. So we're ready to go with our root node. So we can do root this dot root node dot position is going to be equal to a new vector 3, which is a Babylon vector. But we're going to take our vm dot position dot x, our vm dot position dot y, and our vm dot position dot z, and apply that. And then we're going to take this dot root node dot rotation. Rotation is the same thing. New vector 3 dot vm dot rotation dot x comma vm dot rotation dot y and vm dot rotation dot z. Okay. So we got our root node. We're setting our position and our rotation. I'd like to stub in a mesh of sorts just so we can see what we're working with. It doesn't have to be perfect yet. But what I'm imagining is a long, skinny rectangle or a box, essentially, like a cube, long, skinny cube, and then a cube at the end, another little cube at the end that's going to be essentially represent the head of the tape measure. Okay, so let's go ahead and stub those in here. So we're going to do this. We're going to call it the long skinny part, the tape. So we're going to have this thing called what should we call it? Do we need to keep track of it? We're just going to call it tape for now. It's going to be equal. I'm going to have to look around a little bit. Where do we make squares? Batter boards. I've made some rectangles in there before. Let's look in here real quick. Create box. Here we go. I am going to just grab this and bring it over. And we'll have to get into the inspector and poke around and get this cleaned up because I'm not that great at setting these things up right away. We're going to call this tape. And we're going to set the parent to this root node. Position and scaling. Oh, we do need to keep track of this tape because we're going to have to adjust the scale. We have to stretch it out, right? When the tape gets moved and changed its length. So constant tape, we're going to hold on to it there just for now. Set the position, set the parent root node, set the position. We're going to move it. Let's just put it 5. No, these are in inches. So let's make it kind of big just so we can see it. Let's do 25 along the X. What's wrong? I can't do that. Tape mesh like this. Okay, we're going to do it like that. We're going to rotate it to 0. We're going to set the scale to, okay, these are in inches. So X is the length of that tape. So let's do 50 inches there. Y is the thickness. So let's do something thin. And so let's just make it like, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch for now. Again, these are just to get something going. And then 1 inch wide. Kind of a fat tape. Let's do 3/4. No, 1 inch wide. All right, rotation is 0. Metadata. Do we want metadata? I'm not going to put metadata on this yet. We're not going to do, yeah, let's make some material for it. No, we're not going to do any of that. All right. Now, we're going to store this tape mesh up here. That's going to be a mesh. And let's go ahead and do this dot tape mesh is going to be tape mesh, like that. Now we can do this kind of stuff we need to do here. So this dot tape mesh, and this is going to be the length, VM dot length, and this is going to be 0.5 times, this is half length, because the center, so we're going to stretch this box out, but the center of that box is half the length. So the length, stretch the box out to the length of the tape, and then we're going to do this half of the VM dot length for the offset for the position. All right. This may be about done. We're getting close. I mean, we're going to replace this with a real mesh, but what I want you to note is how simple this is. There's very little logic. We're making some meshes. I mean, there is some tedious mesh building. That's because we don't have a GLB for a tape yet. We will soon. We set up our node, you know, but really notice up here when we update our view, nothing has to be calculated. We're not doing transformations. We do, I guess, do a little bit of calculation here. If we wanted to be super pedantic or super crazy, we could pass in the position of the mesh and the scaling. But I feel like if we did that, we'd be making too many like assumptions. The PM would be too ingrained in what Babylon needs as opposed to what a general tape measure. Because now that we've identified that a VM has a position, a rotation, and a length, you can imagine, and we're using a generic vectors for these guys, we could write this exact same view in Three.js or in Babylon without having to do anything to our domain, right? This is all we'd have to write to flip the tape measure to Babylon, relatively speaking. I'm sorry, flip it to Three.js or something like that. And so that's the beauty of this. We have made our view here as dumb as possible. All right, how much time we got? Oh, we're at 12 minutes. Let's go ahead and do our repo. So, whoa, as I was talking, I remember we forgot to dispose of this guy. This guy can't be deleted, so let's go ahead and write our dispose in here. And what that looks like is this. We need to make sure our PM is disposed. We also need to delete our root node. .root node .dispose. That'll clear out the mesh. And I have to look back and see. Let's go to our batter boards. I have to look back and make sure I dispose of these guys right. Because, wait, I don't have a dispose in here. Surely, here we go. This is what I want. Now there's some flags you pass in. And if you don't pass these in, it doesn't dispose of like the material and the children. And we want to. All right, so there's our view. Let's add a list thing. So what we've done, what I do is, so this is the view itself. This is the actual tape measure you're going to see in the scene. But somebody's got to be spawning this when a new tape measure is created as an entity. So that's a different object. I call it I'm going to call it, let's go ahead and kick it off. I'm going to call it a tape measure list. Yes. Maybe tape measure view list. All right. Now this is going to be the object or the guy, the entity or the object that's responsible for both creating new views of the tapes and also removing views if they've disappeared. So the way we do that is this is going to be a class because it's persistent. It's going to keep track of this list. And we're going to call this tape measure view list. All right. Now the important thing this thing does is it's going to attach to the repo. So we're going to have a constructor, and it's going to have a tape measure repo. Remember, this was an entity we wrote that keeps track of the library, the repository of tape measures. So this is a tape measure repository. Anything else? We're going to need the scene because we got to pass that on, scene. And we're going to need that root, world root, because we pass that on to world root, and that's a transform node. I wonder if I would want to put all the tapes together under one node. This would be the spot to do it, but we're not going to do that quite yet. So trans transform node. Okay, great. We got to bring in our scene. Now I don't expect this guy to be disposed. He's going to be always there. We're going to create him once at the beginning, and then he's just going to start listening. So he's going to take this tape measure repo, and we're going to add a tape add observer. We're going to call this dot on tape added. Haven't made that yet. And then we're also going to do a tape measure repo dot remove add tape measure removed observer, and it's going to be this dot on tape removed. Okay, let's go and build those functions out. So we got this on tape added, and let's make that into an arrow function. We're going to have a tape that's tape like that. All right. No. Jeez, that's not good. What's wrong here? Don't you know a tape entity? Oh, it's probably tape measure. There it is. And on tape removed. And that's going to be an ID. We don't pass the tape when we remove it. All right, so now what we need is we're going to need to keep track of these guys, because obviously they're going to be created and then they could be destroyed. So we got to keep track. So we're going to have a private view lookup. That's going to be equal to a new map. It's going to be a string on one side, and a tape measure is the key in the value. SURE, and we're going to create that like that. What's wrong? I spelled it wrong. There we go. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do, we get told to create a tape, or a tape has been added. So just to be robust, let's make sure the ID isn't already in our lookup. We've already accounted for that, but let's just be extra careful. We don't want to be spawning. Too many of these things are kind of expensive, so we're going to do this if this dot view lookup has tape dot ID, we're going to return. All right, just get out of there. All right, next we're going to make a view. So constant view is going to be new tape measure view like this, and we're going to pass in that tape. Ooh, we need our scene and our world root to be stored. So private scene is a scene, and a private dot world root is a transform node. All right, and let's go ahead and get these guys stored. This dot scene is scene, and this dot world root is equal to world root. And now we can pass this into scene and this dot world root. All right, great. And then we need to add this to our lookup. So this dot view lookup dot set tape dot ID, and then the view. There we go. Wait. That's right. We want to store this lookup to be the tape measure view. All right, and then get another event when a tape is deleted or removed from our repo. In that case, we just want to check to see if we've got it. If we don't, we're out of here. Actually, let's do it this way. We're going to do constant view is going to be this dot view lookup dot get ID. Now, it's possible this comes back undetermined or indeterminate, undefined. And so if not view, we're out of here. Otherwise, we're going to do view dot dispose. You know what? We could probably just do this as a question mark, couldn't we? All right, we're just going to go like that. It's not going to hurt anything. It's got an if in there. And then we're going to do this. We're going to remove it from our lookup. So this dot view lookup dot deletes ID. There we go. So this is how we tie into our repo entity. And this is how things are created and destroyed. The views are created and destroyed. So pretty simple. You'll notice that there's not a lot going on here. Finally, let's initialize our view list. We'll do that in our, we have a thing in here called setup scene. And you can see this is where we make our like string list, our stake list, our batter-board list. Let's just go ahead and add our tape measure. New tape measure view list, and we're going to pass in our do we have entities.tape? Oh, so we didn't add our tape measures to the entities. It's not a big deal. I just should have done that. I made a video about that. So, because this is kind of like stepping back. But let's do it. So, in our entities, we've got this thing called the boundary. And what I've done is I collect up all the entities that we have into this entity context. Now, this is for the list. This is not for the individual tapes. The tapes are added to the repo for tape measures, the tape measure repo. So the entity I want to add to this is the tape measure repo, so that it can be passed around and used by other classes, by use cases and whatnot. So we're going to have our tape measure repo, and that's going to be a tape measure repository like that. And then we're going to go ahead and create that down here with a make tape measure repo. There we go. So now we've added that to our entity context. Our Babylon setup script is handed that entity context right here. Here's our entity context. So we've got entities. And this thing really just wants the tape measure repo. And it wants the scene, which is already being passed around in here. And it wants the, where's our root? I'm kind of messing around how I've done the root. Is this return? Yeah, the root is here. So I'm going to go back to this way. There we go. All right. Now, I think we're running. We've got it set up. So let's run over to our main real quick. And let's just stub in a string just to get it there. We don't have a way to add a string yet. So I have this spot called stub in props where we're past the entities. And let's just take and make a tape measure and see if we can get it to show up. So constant tape is going to be make tape measure, not repo, just a tape. Make tape measure. And we're going to call it tape 1. And we're going to say it's attached to, it doesn't matter. We're not really attaching it to anything yet. So we're going to attach it to a string. All right, and then let's set the tape dot start position, start point to equal. Remember, these are in inches. Let's just do 0, 0. Make vector 2, and we'll do 0, 0. And then let's just do a tape dot endpoint to make a vector. And let's see, inches. Let's just do 50 and 50. So it's going to be kind of at a 45 off to the side. And let's see, it should kind of run this way. Do we have this running? All right, let's bring this over here. Let's close other tabs. Okay. Let's put this. I like to keep my console open, look for errors. All right, so let's mount it, new state. I was hoping we would have a tape measure in there, but we don't appear to. Let's refresh one more time. Make sure I called this. Stub in props. I didn't add it to the repo. There we go. Tape measure repo. We created the tape, but we didn't add the tape. There we go. All right. Let's see. Did we pass? Still compiling. Oof, why are we compiling for so long? Oh, there we go. Cool. Clear this out. Oh, do another compile. Hey, look at that. We have a tape measure and it's going the way we thought it would. All right. All right. Nice. Cool. So now that we got that in there, that's great. Let's look at it real quick. So I think what we can do is, it's hard to tell if it's the right length. I also want to add like the kind of a roughed out like body of the tape measure. Is what I want to add as well. So let's go ahead and finish cleaning this guy up. So before we get too deep, let's add a material just to get some color on them. Set up tape measures. They're kind of a yellow color. So let's go back to our tape measure view. This is our list. Let's make our material. So private tape, and that's going to be the it's going to be I like the PBR materials. What do we call it? PBR. And let's do another mesh, body mesh, and that's going to be a mesh as well. And then let's do a private dot body material. These will all get replaced with a real object eventually. But for now, okay, so let's do this. Kind of the same stuff, except this time it's going to be body mesh. And we're going to do all this down here. And we're going to call this tape, we're going to call this body. Now, the body itself is going to be, I wish I had a ruler. What, 4 inches in the X? Scaling. It's going to be about, what do we say? 4 inches, 3.5 inches wide. Y is the height. Let's make it square. 3.5 inches wide and 1.25 inches thick. That's just the body, you know. So rotation 0 position. We'll set the position at 0 to start with. We're going to have to calculate that in position up at the next one. Vector is 0. Oh, shoot. I did this in the wrong spot, didn't I? Okay. Let's grab this and set that up here for a second. Grab this and put that down here. All right, that gives us our little tape body. And then we got to make some materials. So we're going to do this dot, well, let's just do it. Constant tape material. It's going to be equal to new PBR, this one. We're going to call it we're going to add it to this scene, and then we can say, well, we'll tweak the colors in a second, but we can come down here, we can say this dot tape mesh dot material is going to be equal to tape material, and we'll do the same thing for this one. Eventually these things are going to need to highlight and be pickable and all that stuff, but we'll get to that. So tape, so this is going to be body material, and this is going to be here, body mesh, tape body material. All right, and then finally, oh, we got to set those. What? Oh, we're storing them. Okay, okay, we can do that. So let's do it like this. There we go. And ooh, tedious, huh? Tedious. All right, finally we got to push the head of the body of the tape measure down to the end. So we got to do this this dot tape, because the length could be changing. Tape, well, the body mesh dot position. Well, we'll start with this. is going to be the length in the X. It's going to be pushed, it's going to be centered in the Z, so the Z is going to be 0, but it's going to be pushed up half of its width, which is 3.5. So what is that? 1.5 plus, so 1.25, no, 1.75. And then this should be the length plus half of that again, so plus 1.75. Let's see. All right, refresh. Mounts. Hey, look at that. We got the. There we go. Sick. All right. I think that's good enough for now. You guys can see what we did here. The next video, we are going to look at. Let's see. We've got some use cases we could work on. We could drag this guy around, just not worry about adding them yet. Adding a tape measure is a little bit harder. Well, let's work on the next one. We will drag this by clicking on the head, the body here. Clicking and dragging on this will move them around. So our next input, our next script is going to be a controller and probably a use case or two. That's next. Cool.